Okay, right. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody. So I'm very pleased and privileged to welcome you to this Meet the Author session that we are running in collaboration with Trotman. So today we're going to be hearing from Dr. Denise Taylor, who is the author of a book called Career Coaching for Midlife and Beyond, which is one of the latest books in the collaboration series that we're doing with Trotman Publishing. So Denise will be presenting kind of the main themes from her book and what led her to write it in a moment. Um, Please add any questions you have for Denise in the chat. We will collate those at the end, and feel free if at the end to unmute yourselves if you're comfortable to do that. But for now, I will hand you over to Denise.
Thank you so much, Ollie, and hi to everybody who's listening in, and especially to Naomi and Omjit, because I can see your names down the side, and there may well be more people. I was so delighted when CDI and Trotman asked me to do this Meet the Author session, because I think it's really nice to get to know the person behind the book and to know a bit more of the story. And I hope you find it interesting and informative. So that's me. This is my living room. Okay. So just a bit about me. I'm a chartered psychologist. I studied occupational psychology and I set myself up self-employed in 1997. And I've spent well over 25 years now helping people in careers. And predominantly it's been midlife and later life, although there's also been a large number of younger people as well. But particularly as the years have gone by, I've been known as a bit of a specialist for working with an older client base. And I'll come into it again in a moment, but in 2016 I was asked to write Find Work at 50 plus, and that was the sort of, I think was sort of the linch point to go into writing things and to working more with an older age group. And I'd always wanted to do a PhD, and I did my doctorate, which I got in 64, at 64, so that was about 4 years ago now. And I researched something that I was really interested in. I mean, I had thought about earlier transitions, but given I was over 60, the thought of the transition into later life really appealed to me. And I like creating slideshows. So this one here is me in my wood, because during lockdown, I bought myself 4 acres of woodland, and I spend a lot of time just looking after the trees and doing my thinking in the quietness of the wood. So why this book? You know, I've already written other books, but with the changing demographics, we've got more and more people getting older. And if you're already working with a younger client base, it's very different to working with people that are older. When I work with my teenagers and graduates, you know, they've got, like, the world really is their oyster. They can go on and do many, many different things. But in your 40s and 60s, people have got family commitments, they've got financial commitments, they're possibly even beginning to face health issues. And it's not so simple to make career choices. And we've also got the whole thing about ageism, which some of it is going on out there. And although there's more and more talk about it nowadays, it's been happening for 20 years or more, but people just talk about it more. And the book was written based on sharing stories of people that I work with, because I think that's such an important way of teaching and learning and growing, is to read stories from other people. But also, if you're working in the career coaching area, for you to create your own stories that you can share, because people learn so much more from stories than just from more academic text. So the book is about how people are approaching things in the workplace at 40 plus, but also looking to the future, thinking about what might life be like when you move beyond full-time work. And you can't just look at career decisions alone. I mean, you can't at any age, but in particular, as you move into later life, you've got to think about when people lose their job in their 50s, or when people retire. It's like, well, who am I if I haven't got my job? And who am I if my health means that I can't work like this anymore? And I was talking to somebody recently, and she's been let go from her job because she can't keep up with the pace anymore. You know, she's only in her early 60s, and it's like, well, what am I going to do now? So it's a tough decision for her. And we get meaning and purpose from work. And I think it's clearly we work for money, but people work beyond money to be part of a group and to give them meaning. Okay. And when I'm working with my clients, they'll often say that, oh, I'm just too old to start again, Denise. Have I really got to go and look for another job? It's really tough on people when they're being made redundant in their 50s and then and even in their 60s. But then they're going like, but I can't stop working now. First of all, they haven't got enough pension for that. But also it's like, but I'm still young and I don't want 30 years of stopping. And I thought that was a nice quote from Joe. And he said, in coaching, we framed what he loved, explaining things, mentoring, and that led to a whole new direction. So it was unpicking the things that he'd done in the past to look for a new direction. And clients sometimes just need encouragement to take a broader view. So, because I don't know your background, but I'm assuming, given this is a CDA event, that all of you, most of you, are already career coaches and working with this sort of client group. And if we're supporting people in midlife and late life transitions, this is the book that you need. But it's also useful for people within HR who are wanting to look for ways about how they can support the older workforce. And I think it's also can be for individuals to work through it themselves, or ideally that you work through it as a career coach and they work through things alone, and then you can come together to discuss some of the activities and what's coming out from it. A sort of a, let's both look at this together. Another picture from my wood. So what led me to write this book? As I said, I've been an independent career psychologist since 1998, and I've literally worked with thousands of people. But I just wanted to tell you a bit about how I came to write the book, because it's bringing together a whole range of different things. And in that picture, that's a bench I've got on the edge of my woodland so that I can look out into the vista of a field rather than just the trees. So how I wrote my first book, I was asked to go on Tonight with Trevor McDonald back in 2008, helping 3 graduates get a job in a recession. And the director of the TV programme said to me, you ought to write a book on this, you're like really good. And I said, well, okay. And I tried to get a contract writing a book, and the publishers that I contacted, remember this is back in 2008, were all saying to me, it's going to be like 18 months before a book can come out. And I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous, I need to write it now. And I wrote the book over Christmas because really I just downloaded everything out of my head. And it came out in March. And I learned a lot about setting up my own publishing company to do it. But it sold well. And 2 years later, I brought out the second edition, How to Get a Job in a Recession, version 2. This time it was more swizzy with downloadable stuff as well. But I hadn't quite finished writing How to Get a Job in a Recession when Trotman got in touch and asked me to write winning interview answers for first-time job hunters. They had a series of books like that. And then a few months later, I think it was in June, I got approached by Harriman House to write Now You've Been Shortlisted. And people often think you have to go like really, really searching to get a book contract, but they just came to me. So that was how things started. That's how things started. And then I got approached by Icon Books, who are an imprint of Penguin. And the book on the right, Getting the Job You Want, that came out. And then a few years later, they rebranded it as Find Your Dream Job, which was pretty much the same book with a few changes. But the reason I put the cover of the one on the right there is because they said they wanted to bring out a special edition for the University of Surrey, and they were going to produce 1,750 copies. And I'm thinking, hey, this is a holiday. And I literally got 6 pence per book because, yeah, royalties are not the reason why people write books, but it certainly got into a lot of hands. And then I didn't write a book for a few years, and Trotman came back to me again. And they'd got the You're Hired series, and you may well have read some of their books and have them on your shelves. But they wanted me to write a book aimed at the 50-plus market. And I think at this point, I was already developing my particular expertise in this area. I was late 50s at this point. I'm trying to think, 2016. Yeah. So I was about 58, 59 when I wrote this book. And again, it was a bit like, let's just download everything that's in my head. Let's just share the knowledge that I've got. And I was really pleased with that. And it's got the flash on it, because at this point I'd won 2 awards. I'd won a career award with the CDI, well, the ICG as it was before. I won the award for working with adults for my gold career programme. And then I won a second award 2 years later for my job search programme. So, you know, I've got credibility, certainly, for the work that I did. And I've also done some other things as well. The book on the left about wedding customs. When I got married the second time, we were members of the Sealed Knot Reenactment Society, and I did a lot of research because I wanted a wedding rooted in 17th century traditions, and we had a 17th century banquet. And the person who did the banquet for us was also a publisher, so he got me to write that book. I've been various sizes in the past, but at one point I was 22.5 stone and I got to 12, and I'm a bit heavier, but not a lot heavier than that now. There's been lots of ups and downs. So I wrote that book. And I wrote a set of career values cards that sold really well, but it just ended up that my spare room wardrobe was just full of boxes of cards. And it came to a point a couple of years back and I thought, I don't want to be reprinting them and doing these anymore. So I took them off sale. Because nowadays I think people can just do that sort of stuff online. But you can just see the breadth of the things that I've done. But I think what's important to share is I only started this over 50. So it wasn't something that I'd been thinking about for years. But it's more important about my later books. So there's me, you know, with my fancy hat, going up to get my doctorate at Senate House. And on the right, it's me winning the award last year. As Alexander Price, my editor, said, she was crowned Career Researcher of the Year. And that was based on my academic research that I did. And that became a book that Trotman didn't publish, but that was published by Routledge. And that was to take my academic stuff and to make it in a way that was accessible to all. And that was the hardest book I've probably ever written, because I had to ensure it was academically right and it had all the right references in place, but I couldn't just lift what was in my thesis. I had to rewrite everything. And also that's not my wood, because it had to be a Getty image. But that was positioned me now. So I've got the find work at 50 plus and I've got the rethinking retirement. But what about the bit in between? And that's why I wrote the book that we're all here to see, career coaching for midlife and beyond. And at this point, I'm 67, writing this book, and I've been working for 52 years at this point, because I started work at 16. In fact, I started work a month before my 16th birthday, full-time work. And when Alexandra asked me to write the book, when Trotman asked me to write the book, it was, you know what, this has been really useful, because I have got years and years of experience of working with a later age group. And I'm also moving on in my life. And really, as part of my legacy, is to give coaches the tools that they need to work with this older age group. And I think that's a good place to be. It's less about me doing the one-to-one coaching anymore and more about supporting other people who are doing it. And it's supporting the coaches to support the people, because we've got more and more older people moving into a stage of life that's very different than parents' generation. And a lot of people have a voice in their head that says they're too old and they're past it and they're never going to do this. And it's around challenging that, because you're not too old and it's not too late. But if you keep telling yourself it is, then it is. So I'm bringing together all my knowledge through a lifetime of work, my academic research, and what it's like to be 68. Because I was talking to somebody about people who interview in their 30s, or at 30, say, and they don't know what it's like to be older. Whereas if we're in our 40s, 50s, 60s, we've been every age along the way, and we can go back and remember what it was like. And so that's what I'm bringing. I'm bringing years of experience, professional experience working with people, the research I've done, and I continue to read academic papers. It's one of the things you get from being a PhD student is you learn how to read academic papers fast and interpret them, and my own lived experience. So it was something that's going to be supportive to you to support your clients. And these are some of the things that are covered in the book about how your work identity will shift with change. You know, at the beginning of our working life, we're very much focused on, well, not everybody is, I guess, but, you know, about making progress and status and money and things. And then, you know, we have knockbacks, we have setbacks, we get made redundant. We think it's ageism that means that we're not getting a job. You know, our life partner can be seriously ill. We have to then take over perhaps looking after elderly parents, and all of these can affect us. And also our energy can change and our values can change. And I've been doing values exercises for 30 years and I found all of them. And my values have changed very much as the years have gone by. And it's interesting to have seen that. And it generally changes with other people. It's less about status and more about being more aligned in what's true to you. I'm not going to just mention them because clearly everybody's different. And there are 40 particular activities within there that are all tried and trusted and ones that you can use. And, you know, there's lots of practical advice there. So it helps people, whether our clients want to stay in the work, look for something different, whether they want to sort of drop back, or whether they want to actually move on to something else, which again can be a whole range of different things. So if you've already got the book, you already know the chapters, but I thought it would be useful just put them in there. And that just gives you the framework about what the book includes. It gets everything from why we need to do it and the transitions. And, you know, there's a section there about the psychology of this. And it was an extra chapter that I put in as I was thinking through about the ethical considerations, because I think that's not always addressed. And I thought that was important too as well. So one of the things is helping people to go through later life transitions, because it's, why are they coming to see you? They're coming to see, why do they come to see any of us as career coaches, as career counsellors? They come to see us because they need some help. And if they don't need help, they're unlikely to want to come to see us. So they've, you know, it's like, I don't know what to do and I don't know whether I can do it. And I've now left my job. And if I'm not marketing manager or project assistant or whatever, who am I? Am I, you know, do I really want to work so hard? Do I really want to do a 2-hour commute each way? And, you know, all the impact it might have on their health, and maybe they're slowing down and they're, you know, it's like, this is a bit scary because I'm slowing down. I can't operate the equipment just like I used to. Maybe I've got, you know, arthritis in fingers or something. And I think it's also helpful to get people to think about, you can still contribute even if you're not in the job that you used to be, and to explore different ways that people can contribute. And when people sometimes ask me about people in later life, or they talk about people in the third quarter, 50 to 75, and I'm thinking, but you can't lump people like that together, because I am very different than I was at 50, than I was at 60, than I was at 65, and I am now. And the me of now has got really nothing in common with me as 50. So you can't put people into these big categories. You need to treat people separately. And also, you could be 60 and winding down, and my friend Sarah, who's 60, and she's got a child who hasn't gone to university yet because she was a later life mum. So you can't relate how people are based on their age. And I often talk, it's about the stage that you happen to be. So you could be ready to wind down at 50 or not ready to wind down till 80. You know, we can't make decisions based on somebody's age. I think we've just more about there, because I think one of the things we need to be thinking about is, do we want to keep our conversations, our coaching conversations, focused just on the career? Or do we want to open things out broader? But if we open things out broader, we need to think about boundaries and where our capabilities lay. Because obviously if people start raising things about finance, we're not financial professionals, we're not financial planners, but we can talk to them in general terms and we can point them in the right direction. And I'm not surprised anymore, but often discussions of careers also slip into discussions about relationships, because it's not just women, it's men as well. It's like, this relationship, do I really want to stay with this person all into old age? And I'm not surprised anymore, but that's been a greater number of conversations that I've had. And people do get worried about their declining health and their declining energy, or at the moment, they're full of beans, full of health and feeling highly energetic, but they wonder when it's going to stop. So it's a more complex stage of life. So hopefully you bought the book, or you're going to buy the book. And one of the things that I wanted to do as an extra was to pull out some of the activities out of the book and to give them to you as beautifully designed handouts that you can share with your clients. And all the boxes, I'm sure I tried it out, but you can just enter them in their whatever the editable PDFs. So you've got 5 different activities there that you can take away with you and use. And the purpose and contribution cards, it does seem a bit like Blue Peter, but it's print them out and cut them out and use them. But I'm having conversations with Trotman about actually going for a more extensive version of those, so they may well be coming out next year. But there's some good exercises there, but they're just 5 of them. There's another 35 within the book that you can refer to, and there's some that aren't headed as exercises, but they're also activities that you can do. And if you have bought the book, whether it's from Trotman or from Amazon, it would be so helpful if you could write a book review on Amazon. I don't want to beg, but it's something that people look on Amazon, and if there's no reviews, then that sends a message that nobody's really interested in the book. And I've been having some conversations with people on LinkedIn who've said, I'm going to write the review when I've read the book. But you don't have to wait till you've completely finished it. You can do a review, a shorter review, and then you can go back and change it later. And, if every one of you that have signed up for this webinar actually goes and leaves a review on Amazon, it would make me happy, it would make Trotman happy, and it would be the best Christmas present ever. So, I can't really write a review on my own book, but wherever you bought it from, it would be so helpful because people just look on Amazon. Okay. So, why do I write? I've always written, but as the years have gone by, particularly since gaining my doctorate, I just can't not write. And as I'm researching, I just want to share what I'm learning for other people. And I'm writing on Substack. I've been on there at least weekly since April of last year. I've been writing on LinkedIn for over 4 years now. I do a weekly newsletter there. And, I've had an article published in the newspaper a few weeks back, and I've got another one that I've just filed this morning. So that'll be out in the next couple of weeks or less than that. I enjoy writing, and people say I'm good at it, and I get asked to write more. So, but I think this is where I've come to in my life now. It's less about my one-to-one work and more about sharing my knowledge. And the next thing that's come in is something that's been underplaying everything that I'm doing. And I've been thinking of a model for later life. And this is something that has been bubbling under since before I did my doctorate. And it's just a way of looking at the world. It's a model, and people have been saying, you really need to create a model, Denise. So that's what I have. And there's going to be a book that comes out in the spring. And the model is really finished now, but it's all based on a woodland theme. So more will be spoken about that next year. And if you'd like to stay connected with me, and the links will come later, but I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Substack, and you can find me online. But that's where all my writing is now. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I didn't want to fill this time with a presentation, and I didn't want it to be dead boring and I just talk about chapter 1 we talked about. So I'm going to stop the slide share now, and then I'm happy and hopefully I can answer any of the questions that you've got. So let me stop this. And I should be back.
Yes, you are indeed. Yeah, thanks, Denise. No, that's fascinating to hear your journey both through your own career as a writer and towards writing this book. I suppose one of my thoughts is, I mean, I'm a practitioner who has mainly worked with younger people, occasionally adults, but what would you say are some of the main differences in supporting people in later life with career transitions as compared with supporting maybe younger clients?
Yeah, I mean, I still see an occasional younger client, and it just seems to be so easy because their options are open. I'm talking to somebody at 4:30 today who's
Mm.
still at school, and it's basically it's what's she going to do after A levels,
Yeah.
and is it going to be university or not? And they have all these different options. Whereas when we hit later life, I mean, the clients I have are often people earning, they're quite senior people, and if you're earning, I remember somebody who worked in the city and he was well into six figures. This is going back a few years now, well into six figures. And it's like, but how can his bonus, I think, was six figures. It's like, I couldn't quite comprehend the amount of money that he had, but he lived up to that level and he hated it. He hated it. And the only thing he really enjoyed doing was helping out at his child's school with football. And we came up with a 3-year plan that he was going to live on the salary of a teacher and save all the rest of the money. And I think he could probably have paid his mortgage off that way if he stopped all the expensive hobbies and stuff he had. And he did come back to me 3 years later, and he'd started the process of becoming a teacher. So for him, that was fine. But for most of the people I work with, it's like, well, I'm on 65,000, I can't manage on less. And if they're just unhappy, then we can look at ways for making them happy. But if they've been made redundant, as somebody I know who's about to be made redundant from a job earning 80, and the industry is just collapsing, and that person is never going to get a job, I don't think, earning anything like that, but their life is living up to it. That is truly tough, truly tough. And that's the challenge that we have about helping them. You can try and get them to reframe what it's going to be, but if all their expenditure is based on the salary that they're on, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and we have no answers. I can't wave and get them a job. So, but they're the extremes. There's lots of people who are maybe on, more of a middling salary on 30 to 40, and they're just unhappy and they want to do something else. But again, they need to think it through properly. They need to really carefully think things through, because you can't jump before you've really considered everything. Whereas at 21, I mean, by the time I was 20, I'd had 25 jobs. No, by the time I was 20, I'd had 18 jobs. And then I joined the post office and stuck with them for 20 years. But you don't want to be a job hopper, in
No,
later
for
life.
sure. I mean, it's I can see that sort of the material trade-offs people have make it these are extra factors we've got to consider. And I was also wondering about what you said about that kind of introjected sense of, well, can I do X, Y, or Z at my age, or is it kind of time for me to kind of call it a day? I mean, is there anything you say about working with that internal
Mm.
process with clients?
Yeah. I'm a psychologist, and the voice in our head is just so powerful.
Mm,
And just linking into something else that a lot of people talk about is Becca Levy's work about if you've got positive views of getting older. So if you fall over, it's like, I'm falling over because I'm clumsy. because I wasn't looking where I was going. I'm not falling over because I'm now getting old. But you live 7.5 years longer. And the voice in our head is really powerful. If we say, oh, my knee hurts now, I'm not going to be able to do anything, then your body just looks for ways to do that. So when we're working with clients, what we want to try and do, although we're not always successful, because it's not our responsibility to change them. And that's something that I learned later. I used to, it's getting a bit of an aside a bit, but I used to get clients contact me and they say, I've already worked with 3 people and they were useless, but you're the one that's going to say, so, and I used to like buy into it. So yes, I will come in. And then there's clearly things that it didn't work out. And then they'd have just, basically slagged me off to other people about she was useless as well. Because you can't change anybody. But you can encourage them when they say, I think I'm too old to make a change. Then you change that voice in their head about, well, let's think about things that you've already done, later in life that proves you can do something, or what is something that you could try now that will give you some evidence to support you. But if they just sit there and expect you to do all the work, I actually think we're not doing them any favours if we just try overly hard. But I did that for too long. I didn't listen to myself. I used to try really, really hard and get really worn out by them. But now I think we have to let our clients, our customers' clients, be more responsible for their action and challenge them and say, I honestly, I would now say something like, you know what, if you carry on thinking like that, you're right. And I think we need to pause now and you go away and you decide. I'm quite hard hitting in the way I talk to people now. I think you need to go away and have a think whether you do want to put some effort into getting a job. I wouldn't word it quite like this, but you put some effort into getting a job or not, because you've got to want to make the change. And clearly that's easier for me to do as a self-employed career coach when people pay me, and less easy if you're being paid by an organisation. But I think that's one of the lessons I'm learning as getting older. It's like we're not responsible for their actions. I mean, we can support them, but it's not our responsibility. And learning that is like, wow.
I think a lot of us listening relate to that, can relate to that kind of point earlier in our careers as career development professionals of letting go and not wanting to, resisting the urge to rescue the client and have the answer and the magic wand or the crystal ball under the desk and that and so on. There's a question here from Angelica. I'll just read out to you. So she says, Denise, you seem absolutely great and you're such a lovely person. I've got a question. Since you work with so many clients in that age group, could you say how you deal with the issue of ageism? Do you sometimes challenge your clients about perceiving something as being ageism? Or is it that you sort of more objectively see happening to clients? It's obviously a case of discrimination, but we all know that some employers still do this. Can you speak to the question she's putting there?
Yeah, I will. And if anybody's on LinkedIn, maybe it's just the ones that appear on mine, but every third one seems to be somebody with some story. There's a LinkedIn style now, I think it's produced by AI, that you tell the story and it's lots of white space around it. But anyway, but they're all saying about how life is unfair and is all ageism. And it takes me back to 15 years ago when I was writing with clients, when I was writing how to get a job in a recession, when I was writing find work at 50 plus, I was talking about being older and trying to get a job back then, and what to do. And some of the reasons people weren't getting a job was I used to live in a house and they used to have to walk up just one flight of stairs. And one of them was a marketing manager in his 50s, and he was out of breath by the time he'd walked up one flight of steps. And his shirt was pulling, he'd put on a bit of weight. And when we talked about things, he was a marketing director who had no marketing qualifications. And I said, how come you never did them? He said, well, I didn't really need to because I'd got staff working for me and they got it. So he'd not taken responsibility for his own development. And that was a tough one because he needed to get those qualifications just to get seen. So obviously there is ageism in the workplace, but I think it's also, but there's things that people could do. So make sure you're keeping yourself up to date. There's short courses you can do. The other one is their CVs are terribly out of date when they're still, well, probably not now, but 10 years ago, they were still putting O levels down. It's like, you're really showing your age on that one. And it's just been a terribly old fashioned CV. So when they say I've had 400 applications and I've not got anywhere, and I'm thinking, well, if you do 500, it's not going to change because you've not actually changed your CV. And then they can be really bad at interviews and they talk about, well, in my day, or their examples are not properly tuned in. And they feel inferior. So there's lots of things that people are doing that's not helping. And also they go in there thinking, well, nobody's going to employ me because I'm too old. Well, this is what happens. So what I've done with people is, first of all, the whole, do you de-age your CV or not? Well, I think we just drop off the nobody wants to know what you did 30 years ago. So you drop those off. So you're not de-aging really. You're just taking out the old stuff. But then if they think you're 40 and you walk in the room and you're 60, or they think you're 30 and you walk in the room and you're 50, then there's going to be this mismatch. So you have to address it straight on. Because as they look at you and they think, oh my God, it's like my dad walking in, or my mother, or my grandmother, that's the worst one, walking in. And then you go, look, I'm older and I just want to tell you why employing somebody like me is going to benefit your organisation. Say it up straight. Be clear why, the experience that you've had. I mean, they may still discriminate against you, but I think make sure, and now we can use AI to get your CV as good as can be, and then get other people to look at it and, make sure it's as good as it can be. So your marketing materials have to be good. But tackle it head on, but also do not rely on Indeed and all the other big search engines for getting a job. Because I was saying this in 2007. If you're over 40, do not use one of these big sites. You need to approach people the direct approach. And I mean, back then when I was on the telly in 2007, I had this graduate and we were in Liverpool 1, and he was going round to stores with his CV and I was standing outside sort of coaching him as he went in to hand his CV in. Nowadays you couldn't do that because it's all handled centrally, but you can get to know people that work in the companies so that they can be your advocate. So yeah, there is what is weird is there's all this ageism and people are going like, we don't want older people, but with the whole demographic time bomb and everything, there's a lot less young people. So like, if you don't get older people to do the job, who's going to do the job? And had you not thought, you 35-year-old HR professional, in 10 years' time, you're going to be 45 and you're going to be facing this, So I hope that helps. But that's, it's, people are always going to say about its age. And young people will say they're too young. But I do think what I've said about tackling it straight on if you get to interview and saying, look, I just want to, this is why you want somebody like me. But equally, I mean, I've got grey hair now and I'm happy to have grey hair. You've also got to think about how you present yourself, because it may be that you do need to maintain dyeing your hair, but you certainly want to be wearing clothes that are contemporary, because I also remember interviewing people who look like they've got their 80s power suit out of the wardrobe. I mean, I know this wasn't last week, but like a 20-year-old out of date outfit, and it just looks completely dated. So you do need to look like you're slightly, at least given a nod to being like on trend, rather than that's what got me a job in 1999. It will get me a job now. No, it won't, because it's kipper ties or whatever.
So it sounds like it's really coaching people to kind of see their age and their experience as being as much of an asset as their qualifications, as the skills, the transferable skills they talk about, rather than having this internal sense of, well, it's automatically a barrier. I mean, yes, for some employers it is a barrier, and actually
Mm.
maybe they're not employers they'd want to work for if they've got that kind of outdated attitude. But I think what you're saying about the demographic time bomb is pertinent, and it's only going to grow as an issue. I mean, we've now got to a point where the present government is starting to talk about declining birth rate, isn't it? You know, it's actually openly being discussed at a policy level, and this is something that happens to us all just on a human level. I mean, it is a nettle that we've got to grasp, and you know, I say this, of course, in the context of a very youth orientated commercial culture too. Um, but we need changes. So I'm just looking at the chats. Don't see any other chats there. So just finally, can you just remind people where they can purchase both this book and any of your other books?
Well, the Trotman books are available from the Trotman website. And obviously, all my books are available on Amazon as well. And I do know sometimes when you're on one of these webinars and it's like, do I want to put my hand up and say something? No, I might not say it right, or I'm not quite sure how to verbalize what I want to say. Message me on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I actually had an article that went out today, my newsletter, and that was all about the importance of research because
Mm.
people are forever quoting things incorrectly, and that's something that I just think is important to put out. So I write a whole. I mean, in 4 years on LinkedIn, I've written articles of everything you can think of to do with later life and retirement. Yeah, I can still think of something more, but feel free to message on one of my things, and then I can respond there. But of course, you can buy the book on Amazon, and of course, I would love you to write. Trotman as well would love you to write a review. It doesn't have to be long, but it's a useful book, and it's part of my legacy that I wanted to have something that will live on as in a way of supporting career coaches, because there's books that I referred to 20, 30 years ago, and yeah, so this should be one that should be on your shelves.
I wholeheartedly agree. So thank you so much for your time today, Denise. So just a reminder, this session has been recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back, and slides will be shared as well. But for now, thank you very much, Denise, for a very illuminating talk.
Okay, and thank you for everybody for both watching here and